Truth, it's not a choice. Once you touch it, even though you can't fully hold it, it demands to be shared. The burden of truth is something that every human being carries, every student carries. But how you carry it really matters. There's three pieces to the burden of truth. So first, the accumulation of truth is difficult because it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And anyone who's studied anything knows that that's true. The question becomes, is it worth all that time and energy? Carrying something that you've accumulated proves difficult and frustrating because the world around you, the crowd, is largely indifferent to it. Or, even worse, you are attacked for that often, judged for that. The ultimate task, of course, is integrating it. How do you put it into the world? How do you integrate it into your personal life? How do you integrate it into your professional life? I mean, these are really complicated things to do. Our program is not only about accumulating the truth, but it's about carrying and integrating it into your life in a way that's elegant. A lot of people walk away from the truth, right? They walk into unthinking. The life of thought is the life of the higher, if that makes sense, versus, of course, the opposite, the lower. And virtually everyone abandons truth, and they walk in the direction of whatever is convenient, the propaganda of the moment, because that's where the crowd is, and it's safe there. So I want to remind you of something. Nothing worthwhile has ever been achieved by staying safe. Are you with me? Safety is an opiate. Okay? You're young people, right? Now's the time to take risks, students. If you stay safe and you just do whatever people in the crowd expect you to, you will very quickly lose your spark, lose your fire, lose the thing that makes you human, frankly. Embrace the risk. Risk it all. That's my advice. While you're young and you still can. Things change when you get older and you have children and you have responsibilities and you have mortgages and you have all these things on your head. It's harder to take these risks. So you got to recognize the time that you're in, whether it's the kind of truth that you accumulate, what you do with it. Welcome to a real education, by the way. That's what we're doing here. It's not just learning cool stuff and converting to truth. It's the burden of truth. It's carrying this damn thing and finding a way to integrate it into your life. If you can do it elegantly, cleverly, you're living the high life. And I'm not talking about, $100 bills, whatever, depending on the rate of inflation. Sorry. I'm talking about high life in terms of the life of the transcendent, the human life, the real meaningful life. A life hopefully filled with art. But it's a difficult thing to do, and I want you to know that from the beginning. Truth is not just something, as we saw, that you read about from a book, right? Truth is something that you experience, that you live. Salinger, a very educated young man who was highly literate with attuned faculties of perception and imagination, walks in voluntarily to this nightmare. He's a Jewish man, and he saw for the first time the reality of the Holocaust as a Jewish man. Just picture a place dedicated to the extermination of your people. And remember, it's not just Jewish people. Slavic people, were the predominant majority in the concentration camps. So a place on an industrial scale dedicated to the eradication of your ethnicity. And he spends his life after the war basically in seclusion. After the success of his book, Catcher in the Rye, he buys a modest home in the mountains, sage-like, and he spends the rest of his days, frankly, writing 8 to 12 hours a day for, I don't know, almost 60 years. The interesting part, he doesn't publish anything after 1965. That's the one. We looked at another example of the burden of truth, namely Oliver Stone. Of course, he's still very much alive. Salinger was a product of the Second World War. Oliver Stone was a product of the Vietnam War. He's a filmmaker, of course, and he makes both fiction and non-fiction. He's a dramatist. He oftentimes describes himself as a dramatist, and I believe we looked at some examples. Through the fiction, ironically, you get to tell what the world, it seems, can't absorb, because it's art, because it's fiction, because it's just a story, because it's just a movie. And of course, we talked about, who is this? Julien Benda. He, of course, is famous for quite a few things, but I suppose his name is most often associated with a book entitled, are you ready for this? The Treason of the Intellectuals. Julien Benda was observing a very particular kind of a truth in his day. Namely, he was observing this phenomenon which we identified in our class as careerism, if you recall. It's this thing that happens to the intellectuals, to the group of people who are the most learned, the group of people who are the most capable, who see the most clearly. It is this group, says Julien Benda, who are committing treason, not at the level of a nation, because treason has to do with betraying a nation, your nation, but at the level of humanity itself. And I submit to you, many of your teachers fit the bill perfectly. They are merely careerists. They have lost their commitment to the truth long ago, and what they are enjoying are the benefits of selling out, the safety, the security of a nice, cushy office. So in the name of their own self-interest rather than the truth, they sort of step away from the truth. So they knowingly stop asking the questions and will peddle some nonsense in order to advance in the department, in the government, you name it. So Julien Benda describes this phenomenon, and he calls it the treason of the intellectuals. And it's a treason that was committed in the 20th century, and we, in many ways, continue to pay the price for. So when he talks about integrating the truth, Julien Benda is talking about truth as a social and political responsibility. Integrating truth is much bigger than you in your little life. It's about society, right? In other words, this community, this nation, this world needs you as an intellectual to be not only converted to truth, but to maintain that conversion within yourself, to never backstep when it comes to your commitment to the truth. No retreat, no surrender when it comes to the goal of the truth. Are you with me? That's what it is to be an intellectual. And you have a duty, a moral responsibility, not just to yourself so that you can live a comfortable life, but to your society, to your community. And if you don't live your life that way, if you're merely a careerist, as most people choose to be, by the way, careerists, you have committed treason, says Julien Benda. A little quote. Philosophy, which formerly raised man to feel conscious of himself because he was a thinking being, and to say, I think, therefore I am. Think of René Descartes. Now raises him to say, I think, therefore I am not. What we learn to do, says Benda, as intellectuals, is to stop thinking and rather pursue our self-interest and empower not the truth, but the nation. You're not just an intellectual, you're a German intellectual. You're not just an intellectual, you're an American intellectual. Forget intellectual, let's focus on science. You're not just a scientist, which means, that is to say, you're a thinker for humanity trying to understand the natural world. You're a German scientist, and we should celebrate all German science. And you're an American scientist. Even though you have a German name, we're going to call you an American scientist, which happened, yeah? Because America doesn't get the atomic bomb if it wasn't for the people, the careerists, that immigrate from Germany and conveniently go into America and have wonderful careers, scientific careers. So that wonderful scientific career comes at a high cost. What's the cost? The treason of the intellectuals. You've betrayed, in the name of your self-interest, something far more important, which we've lost sight of: truth itself and humanity. We spoke, and I think Fiona will recall this, about Robert Oppenheimer, right? Who realizes too late what he's done. He's one of the few that feels the deep remorse, because I would call him a human being. I mean, he made a human mistake. He thought he was doing something good. He thought it was the good thing, the right thing, the beautiful thing, the noble thing. And then he realizes that he is death. He's become a weapon of death. That shattering realization is only possible if you stay human. How many people wanted not just to drop the bomb in Japan, but in the case of the Cuban Missile Crisis, part of America in its military-industrial complex was very enthusiastic about wiping out Cuba off the face of the map, and also starting a nuclear war with Russia, with the Soviet Union at the time. Because in the 60s, America had the advantage in terms of nuclear. They would have had, in starting a nuclear war, they would have taken on massive casualties, but they probably would have won. And there was enormous enthusiasm inside of the American government for that. Okay. You know, it's very interesting, and Oliver Stone helps us think about these things if we think of his Untold History of the United States. If you recall that documentary series, because he does films and he does documentaries. That's how he integrates the truth. It's very interesting to think back if Roosevelt had lived 100 more days. The probability of America dropping the bomb on Japan is basically zero. If Kennedy wasn't assassinated, Vietnam would have, Kennedy declared that he was going to pull out of Vietnam no matter what. It was a lost war. If he had stayed alive, he wasn't assassinated, what would have been? But we know, Smedley Butler, right? War is a racket. Sorry about that. Back to Julien Benda. What we're learning in school, are you with me, students? What you're learning in school now is not that you're a thinking thing. What you're learning is to pursue your self-interest above all else. Am I right? You're a university student and you're in one of the most, actually it is the most coveted program in pharmaceutical science in the country, is it not? Tell us about the pharmaceutical science world and whether you're pursuing the beautiful science and truth or whether you're pursuing a career. Industry nights. Sounds spicy. Exactly. So the question becomes, like, what happened to thinking things? What happened to truth? What happened to making your life about something bigger than yourself? I mean, these are things worth remembering from the past, right? The common good is not about you, it's about all of us. And science is such an empowering thing that arguably it's more important in science than any other field to be humble and to stay focused on the truth. And it's precisely there that that's not happening. In other words, the treason of the intellectuals is a very real problem. Of course, in the background here is how the hell to integrate this truth into your life. I mean, the claim is you should study science because it's a beautiful thing to do. But living that is going to be difficult. It's going to be complicated, particularly because it's a world filled with, as you've identified in your industry nights, it's a corporate world, isn't it, Junchao? So good luck integrating the truth in the corporate world. Unless you're the owner of the corporation, it's going to be a little bit rough. So it's a tough place to integrate truth. I don't think you fully understand, to be perfectly direct, and I don't mean this in like a condescending way. I don't think you understand what you're in for. Who you are, what your soul is, and all the beauty that's in you right now, it is in the crosshairs of the world that you're entering. There's no place for it, mate. What are you going to do with that? I have no idea. I'm here. Stay connected. We could talk about it a lot, but it's a very difficult challenge that you have. Integrating the truth in general is difficult in your personal life. In your professional life, it really depends on your profession. So if you're not the next J.D. Salinger or the next Oliver Stone, you're going to have to find some sort of maybe a compromise of some kind, but not too big of a compromise. I don't know. Talk about that later, but that's the real problem, right? People talk about school in terms of like a means to an end, right? A means to a given salary, but I think people also forget that even means need ends, if that makes sense. Like there's sorry, that's a little bit of a Roger Scruton reference. You have to have a transcendent thing guiding you, even in pursuit of a career. If your focus is a career in pharmaceutical science, the truth is it's not enough that you get paid. You need to have something guiding you. You need an end, a transcendent end. So I think you have to establish what your end is, what you're after. Beauty and studying science for its beauty is a kind of a transcendent end. That's something you can use day to day in how you approach your studies. But what I'm saying is a transcendent end has to take a practical form in your career itself. And I honestly, man, I don't know what the answer to your particular query is, but here's some truth talk. Every single person has the integration problem. That is the integration of truth. The funny part is people don't realize it until it's too late. To live a moral life, as we've said in the past, will inevitably lead to an institutional clash of values. What the institution is and who you are will clash. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Whether it's the pharmaceutical science institutions, buckle up early is all I have to say. You could see it every industry night. And you could see it in how people are talking about it. Are you paying attention? Open your eyes and ears to those industry nights and see how the crowd is moving. You got to figure out your version that allows you to stay true, to stay human, to maintain yourself as a thinking thing, because that's your defining characteristic, of course, and be able to make a living. It's a very, very difficult thing. I know you guys are thinking about university and careers and these types of things, but I don't think a lot of people tell you directly that that's what's waiting for you. That's the real challenge of a career, I think, is how do you, and when you're young, like when you're young enough, you can feel this as a problem. But people graduate past that pretty quickly and they just focus on the cash and they think, well, happiness will come later. Don't worry about it. I suck it up now and then things get easier later, right? They don't. They don't. If you make the compromise now, you're going to feel it later. Like if people talk about problems, that's a genuine problem. There's a difference between a problem and a genuine problem. The burden of truth is a genuine problem. There's no quick fix to this. It's going to take you decades to figure it out, if you figure it out. Most people don't. Are you discouraged from the truth? Notice the balance here. I'm trying to present the truth to you and convert you to the truth, but I want you to understand what it is. It's complicated. It's difficult. It's demanding. Yes, Brandon? I don't know if it's about thinking small. I think risk more is maybe the advice I would give you. Risk more. Risk early. Now is the time for the risks. Later in your life, you don't have that luxury. This is the time to be uncomfortable and to take risks. Like you're in the years where you're supposed to be doing this. Don't get me wrong, like at a certain point, you have to make a compromise, right? Like I say, if you have children to take care of, in my moral like version of the world, all bets are off once that happens. But before it's happened, I think you owe it to yourself to be true to yourself and to stay human, if that makes sense. I can hold that mirror to your faith now, because there's no excuse now. There's no excuse. Anything worthwhile is built on a sacrifice. Anything. If you look at anything of value in this world, this is the big difference between the old generation and the current generation. I'm speaking as a millennial to a Generation Z, but our generations suck at this because everything has been in a little bubble. Who cares if it sucks? Who cares if the crowd thinks you're an idiot? The crowd, if you measure yourself against the crowd, I mean, turn your brain on, please. They're booing you today, they're cheering you tomorrow. They come and go. The haters, we need the haters. Now is the time to take the risks. That's my advice. Is it for sure that it's going to work out? Absolutely not. That's the point. But I'll tell you what, if you spend 10 years risking it all, and you go to a job interview, and you encounter an older version of me, guess what? I'll hook you up with a job. If you took those risks, and you took those hits, and you come to me, battle-worn, tested, defeated, I'll help you out. I'll help you out. But if you come out of school and you expect $100,000 a year just because your dad told you something, my father says, right? Guess what's waiting for you? Of course, it's a proverbial smack. As the James Brown song says, paid the cost to be the boss. Yeah? To be the boss means you take the risk. You take the smacks. Now is the time for risk. Later, different story. No excuse. If you sit on your ass now, that's on you. There's a little testosterone in the air here. We need balance. Sorry. I can't help myself. My main objective is to make you aware of it. To make you aware of the stage of life that you're in, the importance of risk now. And in the end, we're talking about your soul here, May. So right now, just be aware of this. Okay? And take risks. And be active. Don't be lazy. That's my advice. You don't need to have the perfect answer, mate. You just gotta know that there's a problem. Like going with the flow of the crowd comes at a price, and unfortunately, you're gonna be the one that pays it when you look in the mirror. Yes, I understand like that mindset of like change it from the inside, right? Like that's the instinct. I get it. I felt that as well. In the end, I've made my choice, which will look ridiculous to the crowd until it seems like an overnight success. You know, every success story is like decades in the making. I don't know if you realize this. Hey, when you see an overnight success in business, that doesn't exist. Hey, there is no overnight success. So the real test is, can you keep working like a lunatic when nobody gives you the credit? That's the test. So whether that means in the case of government, for me, that's not my game. I know myself. I think it's a personal thing that reflects also personality to a large extent. It comes down to that. Like I can't change the world. It's too big. It's too complicated. If I can change like 10,000 people, I'm good. Like I'm pretty good. Why? Because they're going to be people that come from money, which means they're going to be in the game. They're going to be attuned to beauty. They're going to care about truth. And I think that counts. Okay? Maybe you think that that's bullshit. I don't. It doesn't matter to me, to be honest, what you think. What matters to me is what I think. I think that means something. So I'm cool with that. If you want it to be bigger, which I understand, good luck with it. And I'll be your biggest cheerleader, okay? I will be your biggest cheerleader for life. Because I know it's coming from a noble place, a good place with you, Brandon. But prepare for a long battle. Nothing worthwhile is fast. Nothing worthwhile is easy. It's built on sacrifice and risk. And it comes down to how much can you take. It's a personality thing. It's a question of character. How much can you take? Character is forged, hey. It's something that's forged in battle. And I don't mean that in like a war way. I'm talking about the battle of life, the battle for your soul. It's going to get tested, mate, and it's going to get spicy. Yeah. My suggestion is, I think in your world of science, if that's the game that you're going to play, it really comes down to whether you want to do real science or you want to do pretend science. Pretend science is glamorous. Pretend science pays well. Pretend science is fast, but it's not real science, and you know it, right? So you got to ask yourself, do you have the character to do real science? It won't be fast. It won't be glamorous. People probably won't care too much. If you want an example, think of David Suzuki. This is a guy who studied fruit flies. What? Why would you want to study fruit flies? The point is that his obsession with the truth, in the end, and part of it is his personality, opportunity, Canada, moments, this, that, the other, and he was able to turn it into a kind of a cult of celebrity, which is how most people think of David Suzuki, but really he's about the truth and real science. You see it? So he's come up with a very clever way of integrating it. That's a product of who he is, what his personality is, where he is, and all that. So life is a lovely journey, hey, and it's filled with challenges. And if you're getting up every day and like meeting the challenges, like you should be happy with your life, because that's what it's about, And if you could do it, like I've always felt it's important to be clever. Hard work, of course, that's assumed, but like you got to do it in a way that's elegant. That's my opinion, anyways. Maybe it's my aesthetic taste. I'm not sure, but it has to be elegant. Otherwise, it's not worth doing, is my opinion.